Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. In the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3, Lord Krishna states, "As fire is obscured by smoke, as mirror is covered by dust, as an embryo is enveloped by the womb, so is human understanding obscured by the three qualities." The reference here is to the three gunas. Sattva guna, illustrated by the first example, is easily blown away by a light puff of the breeze of meditation, even as the smoke concealing a fire is easily dispersed. A dust-covered mirror may need a little elbow grease to clean it, but with that rubbing, it can reflect things clearly once more. Rajoguna, therefore, expressed in the right way and with energy comparable to the power of the delusion, can be transformed without too much difficulty to reflect the pure image of spirit. The embryo, however, cannot emerge from its womb until its full time is completed. Even so, with the person in whom Tamoguna is uppermost, no amount of teaching and no self-effort will serve any purpose. Time must simply pass as nature takes its course and brings that person gradually to the point where, after repeated disappointments and the slight glimmering of hope for greater understanding, the inner person finally emerges in the full dignity of a refined human being. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind.
Today's topic is from the Bhagavad Gita, obviously, and it applies not only to different personality types in which Sattvaguna, Rajoguna, or Tamoguna is more predominant, but also it applies to our own karmas. We can have a sattvic kind of karma, a rajasic kind of karma, and a tamasic karma. And so I wanted to speak a little bit about these karmas and different ways of dealing with them, but I also know the dangers of speaking too much about karma, because karma can seem sort of, well, this is just fate, kismet, there's nothing that can be done about it and we just have to endure. And even the tamasic karma reading almost seems to imply that, though it's not the case actually, fully. But there are some karmas that just take their time. So, before entering into this, I wanted to begin with this warning, and I wanted to drive the point home by playing for you a short excerpt of Yoganandaji speaking about karma and what he thought about us spending a lot of time thinking about karma, speaking about karma, karma, karma. And I should warn you, if you only know Yoganandaji through the autobiography of a yogi, when giving lectures and in speaking, his presentation was somewhat different than you get just from reading the autobiography of a yogi. So I'll play this now. It's about 4 minutes. So you almost feel after listening to that we could say Om Shanti Shanti and be done, because he's of course said it all. I thought I might elaborate a little bit. You see, karma is often misunderstood as a very complex thing. And of course, in a way, it can be a complex thing. But karma simply means action. And so even if we start from physics, for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. In the physical world, Isaac Newton established this law of physics. which was established before Isaac Newton, but he put it into words for all of us. So it is true on a spiritual level, on any kind of level. Any action we put out has an equal and opposite reaction. In terms of karma, you can visualize it as when we are in our center and every action proceeds from our center, meaning when we are calm, when we are thinking clearly and perceiving things clearly, when we are loving, when we are open-hearted, when we're in a divine flow, when we're not off balance, in other words, then our actions produce very little ripples in the sort of waves of the universe, in the ocean of the universe. But when we are off-center and then we act, you can visualize that as a karmic reaction also going out like a wave of energy that is also like a boomerang and eventually comes back around and knocks us back into center. You see, we were off-center and this energy brought us back to center, meaning it brought us back into balance. So in that way we can think of karma just as a corrective, as something that is trying to return us to our center point. And if we do something wrong and then suddenly turn and bang our hand, we can go, oh, you know what? I did that wrong thing and there was a equal and opposite reaction. And so, good point. Thank you very much. Life would be very simple and we would all get free very quickly. Because just as the young child reaches towards the stove flame because it's so beautiful and blue, and then as soon as you get near it, you hurt the hand, you say, mental note, don't do that again. And we don't. We don't have to rediscover it for every single flame. We've got it. We remember. That was what we would call instant karma. And that sometimes happens even in fun ways, where you do something perhaps that you shouldn't, and then there's some sudden repercussion and you say, okay, instant karma, I got it. The problem is that karma is not always instant. And so sometimes there can be a long delay before that karma comes back to us. In fact, there can be a delay of lifetimes. Many lifetimes, so far in the past that by the time the karma comes back, we say, hey, why did I get hit with that for? I didn't do anything. I was just innocently sitting and then this thing came. Now, I don't mean to say, therefore, that anything bad that befalls us, well, we deserve it, it's our karma, and so on, in a heavy kind of way. Because, again, we have to skate this ice. I guess ice is perhaps not the best visual image in Chennai. We have to be very careful. It's a very thin line we have to walk in understanding where this comprehension of karma can uplift us, make us feel more empowered, versus it can just make us feel weighed down with burden and so on. So, all that karma is a corrective reaction to action we ourselves have put in the past. So therefore, to blame all kinds of circumstances, all kinds of people for what is happening to us can be tricky. Because after all, if it wasn't our karma to go through this experience, how could it have happened to us? If we hadn't attracted it, not out of sin, unless you think of sin as error, mistake, and not actually out of somehow the Divine Mother's hand saying, this lesson you need now, or this karmic debt you need to pay now, or this karmic burden that you've been carrying, I'm now going to remove from your shoulders. If we didn't have that in ourselves, and this person, say, did something to us anyway, that wasn't our karma, then we have to say, but that makes them more powerful than God. I mean, that makes them able to run the whole cosmos, because this wasn't our karma, and yet they still did it to us, meaning that's impossible. So, it also gives us more freedom, because one easy solution to try to live a peaceful life is to control everyone else. and so you please don't say things that way, and you please don't take this from me, and you please just do your job, and then I can have peace. And we all know how ineffective that is. Just try it. And if you think, no, I might be able to do it, just think how you feel when someone tries to do it to you. As if you can behave this way, then I can feel better. When we take the responsibility ourselves and say, what can I do to feel better? Meaning, sometimes someone will say an unkind word to me, or something will happen that will bother me, and I will, if I react negatively, like, well, yeah, and it comes right out. And then afterwards, I don't feel so good about it. And I think, well, yeah, I mean, of course I don't feel good, but I mean, it wasn't my fault. If they hadn't said that, I wouldn't have had to reply in the way I did, all the justification that we go through. But then I think, just because that person was unfair, say, I am not compelled to react back that way. I'm not a rubber ball that when hit, it has to bounce. I actually could have had some calmness. It's possible I could have had some self-control, meaning I'm not obligated to respond in kind. And in that way, I take the responsibility back. It doesn't change what the person did, but actually, that's really their problem. These things are going to happen to us. We each have to take care of our own scene, our own karma, first. So, moving along in this now, these different kinds of karma, this sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic karma. We can think of it also another way, that when you have an action that you are putting into motion with a lot of intensity and a lot of attachment and a lot of willpower, then the karma that is associated with that, of course, is stronger, because it's like pushing a big wave with a lot of commitment behind it. Versus when you think a thought lightly, or even if you do something but you don't really care that much, you're not that attached to the outcome. Or you simply, even if you're doing something that you don't want to do, as Arjuna asks Krishna in the Gita, why does man act against his own interest, as if compelled by some force, unwillingly, still he does the wrong thing? I mean, thank you, Arjuna, for asking, because we would all want to ask that. Why is it that I know this isn't good for me, and I don't want to do it, and yet still I do it? And on the other hand, sometimes, why are the good actions so difficult to develop in us at times? And so, Krishna simply says, Maya. I mean, he says more than Maya, but that is just condensing his answer. Maya. That, guess what? This is what's happening. Why is there Maya even? It doesn't seem very fair. As Master was even saying in the recording, I can see through the Maya, and I see that it's all a show. But what about everyone else who doesn't see that? Another illustration he gave is, what if you're watching a horror movie? And he said he actually was in a theater where they were watching some horror movie about war. And the audience was screaming and howling in terror. And he laughed because he could see the beam projecting the whole show onto the screen. And he said, this is just a little movie within the big movie. And yet, he said, but the audience doesn't know. And they're terrified. And then at that time he said, God said to him, I'm bringing them all back to me. Eventually. And Master said, what are you going to say? This is just his show. So getting back to the question, why is there this show? Why is there Maya? Well, the scriptures put it rather sweetly. They say that God wanted to create the universe. I guess God was having sort of a slow day and thought, well, what shall I do to entertain myself? And so he decided to create this whole manifested universe. And that was nice, but watching the trees and the ocean waves, after a while, it can get a little dull. So he thought, let me have some people running around. They will make things interesting. And so he created these first two beings, and they were perfect, because they were made from his consciousness. And so they thought, well, I mean, who wants to be separate from God? All I ever want to do is feel that bliss and merge back into him. So they sat, meditated, and raised the Kundalini and went back to God. And God thought, well, that didn't last very long, and I still want more of a show. So what can I do? So then he created a few more folks, and then he said, but now I will distract them. And so he sent Maya out. And so the people being created opened their eyes and saw that, oh, there's an iPhone. And they ran to get the iPhone. And then someone else went over to, get a jacuzzi or a massage or, some fruit. And suddenly there were all these fun things to do. And who needs to think about God? And so the play goes on. Now, that's a cute way to put it. But when we're caught in the Maya, it doesn't seem so cute. And so that's, after a while, we say, enough. As Master said to Divine Mother, I will be thy naughty baby. And in times past, whenever I would cry, you would give me a little toy to quiet me down. But now I want no toys, and I will wake all of creation with my cries until you yourself come to me. And that's the point that we all reach at different times. We say, I don't want any of these other things. Because why? Because I was born of a devotional temperament? Perhaps. But also it's very practical. It's because none of these other things actually work. It's not that they're useless. We need to spend time in strengthening our minds and developing our skills. We need to also work through some karma. Some karma does have to be worked through so we can be freed of it. And we need to have productive lives. Certainly. But we can also know inside that irrespective of what we do outwardly, we are trying to get free. So speaking of these different kinds of karmas, if we put out an action even that is wrong, as I was starting to say earlier, and we know it's wrong and still we're doing it, as Arjuna was asking, why am I compelled to do this? But Swamiji said, mentally resist. Even if you find yourself doing it, suppose you find yourself returning harsh words for something and you think, I just meditated, I just energized, I just read from the Gita, and then the first thing that happens is some person, some auto vala knocks into my car and pow, this fire comes out. And it's just like, oh my God. Even in that moment, try to hold back. Even right after that moment, try to separate yourself. Not to say, well, it wasn't my fault, but to say, okay, I regret that I did that. I resolve more not to do it the next time, and so on. In that way, you will find you've withdrawn some of your energy, and therefore the action that went out and the resulting reaction will be less. So a sattvic karma, which is to say a light karma, is one that is easily dismissed, as easy as blowing smoke away from a fire, meaning the light is then shining without being obscured. A rajasic karma is one, say, perhaps of a habit that we want to get over, and it's a pain, like we're sleepy during meditation, or we find that we're not sitting up straight all the time and we want to, but we keep finding ourselves sitting like this and so on. But you just keep slogging at it, and then it's finished. And then you don't even remember how it was difficult in the first place to overcome. And then there are other kinds of karmas, the tamasic karma. And when it is, the example given is the embryo in the womb, meaning it just takes time. It takes 9 whole months, plus or minus, and that's when the embryo will be born. That's when you can say that karma will come to completion. And there's not a thing we can do about it. There was one in an ashram that Ananda had in San Francisco. There were a large number of devotees living there and building a work there in California. And there were families also. And there was this young boy who was full of energy. So much energy. As Haridas might put it, he was a child who had more energy than he needed. Lots of surplus energy. And then one night, apparently, he was wanting to play, and his mother said, "It is time to go to sleep." And he said, "No, I will play." It was 10 o'clock at night or something. It was late. And she said, "You will have to wait because now it's nighttime and you can't play till the morning." And he opened the door of this, it was actually a very large house, and stood in the stairwell and demanded, "I want it to be daytime." But no matter how much we may want this situation to be over, sometimes it just takes its time. Does that mean we just sit back and relax and wait 9 months? No. It means if we put constant energy out, we will be working to shift that karma. But at the same time, we should recognize that some karmas take time. Meaning we should be patient. Because 9 months, on the one hand, is like, oh my God, 9 months is a long time. 9 months ago, it was January. A lot has happened. But 9 months is not 9 years. It's not 90 years. It's just 9 months. It's not even 1 year. Meaning, it does end. It's important to always remember that all of our karma has been generated by our own actions, which are finite. Which means, therefore, our karma is finite. Situations end. Karma ends. Habits end. Illnesses heal. Everything eventually shifts. And so, as much as it seems like, no, not this one. This one was generated by an infinite action, and so it's an infinite karma. No, it feels like that sometimes, but it's not the case. And so another image was one Ramakrishna gave, which was if you see a nail in a board, sticking out of a board, and think of this nail as your karma. When looking at the nail, you don't know how long it is. Suppose you want to pull it out. You can't tell how long it's going to take. And you don't know how deep it is. It might just be sticking in there and just a little puff and it falls. It may be in there a tiny bit and you have to yank it twice, the Rajasic karma, or it may be in there deeply and long. But all that matters is that you keep pulling on it. And it will come out. It's not an infinite nail. I mean, otherwise there'd be a strange sight, an infinitely long nail. Anyway. So, it's not an infinitely long nail, so just keep pulling. Now we come to another question, because it may seem like, okay, this is all well and good, but what can we really do about our karma? Even situations that we just seem to be stuck with them. Or, I use my will, I use my affirmation. That can be helpful. It shifts energy, certainly. What about willpower? Tremendous. I mean, it's by, again, our commitment of willpower initiated this karma, even if we don't remember. The opposite, positive direction, if we're thinking of correcting, positive direction of willpower can thwart or balance that energy. Swamiji said if you're suffering from a particular karma, put out strong positive energy in the opposite direction. He said, for example, if you keep having things taken from you, then instead be generous and give. In other words, it's almost like things are being taken from you. Why? Because perhaps you took in the past. So now give to balance that. And so it takes a lot of introspection, which is also very helpful work. Why am I wanting to respond this way? Why do I like this thing? Why do I dislike this thing? Meaning, maybe it reminds me of something from the past. We can do all kinds of excavational work to look at our past tendencies and say, I think this needs correction, or I don't want to be this way anymore. It's not easy work always, because it's easier, of course, to look out and say, I don't want that person to be that way. And instead we have to kind of, okay, and place this, because this is where we can make real progress. Because if we're calm and unfluttered by all these things, then we're free. Then we have great power, not only just to be calm, but also to share that calmness with others. We know this world needs more calmness, more kindness, and we have all felt entering into a calm vibration. What a gift that is. And so we want to be able to provide that vibration for others. and be a force for good. So coming back to this last point of karma just seems to run on a conveyor belt, and sure, we can sort of, on the conveyor belt, we can kind of look this way or that way or this way, but the conveyor belt is just going, and there's not much we can do about it. When you meditate, you start to shift your karma. And it's not because I'm a meditation salesman or something, and so I have to. It's actually true. Yogananda said, every time you meditate, some karma is removed. Every time you meditate. He didn't say every time you meditate at least 3 hours, or every time you meditate well, or every time you meditate and go breathless and levitate, then maybe some karma is burned. No, every time you meditate. Meaning, never judge your meditations unkindly or harshly. You meditate, yeah, I was trying, but I was thinking about this thing, and then I slept a little bit, and I tried, it was horrible. Say, yeah, but still, some karma was being lifted during that time. Meditation also, you start to see on the flip side, that when you start meditating, you see your life starts to change. We've seen this a lot with people, that once they took up a practice of meditation, their life started to change. Their life circumstances started to change. And in a way, they broke themselves out of just this pattern that they were on. We have a friend who's an astrologer named Drupada, and he is an American, and he has meditated and studied astrology, meditated on the planets, I should say, and so on, and taken Sri Yukteswar's teachings and Master's teachings and used them in his practice of astrology. And he said, when you read the chart of a normal person, he said, you can more or less predict their personality. You can more or less predict what's going to happen to them. And he even went so far as to saying, if you see two normal people who are just wanting to get married, you can kind of predict the kind of day that they will choose. Meaning it's all just kind of on this beaten path. On the gears are turning. There's not much that changes these things. He said, but as soon as the person gets on a spiritual path, starts meditating, starts practicing devotion, starts putting energy out, he said it gets much harder to read their chart. Because they find all kinds of circumstances changing. It's not that they're changing their basic karma, but they're accelerating the process. I remember one person he was reading a chart for, and he said, well, it looks kind of like you will, you'll probably have a nice quiet time. You'll probably be meditating a lot during this next 2 years. You'll probably have some inner growth going on, but it's a good time to go inside. And then that person, about a month later, suddenly got transferred into this huge job at Ananda in this crazy city, and was suddenly, completely outward. And Drupada said, well, He said, whoops, I guess I misjudged the amount that the role that Rahu would play in this whole thing. But yet, during that time, the person was meditating more and deeper and having lots of inward experiences also. But that devotee, God comes in, and suddenly you find things are different. So, even in the autobiography of a yogi, as it says, that Babaji had a student who went to Adi Shankaracharya for an astrological reading. This is how the story goes. And so that student came back to Babaji just in tears. And Babaji said, what is it? And he said, Shankara has said that I will die 5 days from now. And Babaji said, you go back and tell him that you won't. And so the disciple was relieved, and he went back to Shankara and said, Babaji says I won't. No, I'm kidding. He didn't say it like that. But he said, I won't. And Shankara said, I'm sorry. I mean, there's no way, looking at this horoscope, that there is any other outcome but that. And the disciple said, well, my guru says no. And so Shankara said, okay, if you come back on the 6th day, then I want to go meet your guru. And so on this 5th day, that evening, Babaji said, you stay close to me. And in that evening, suddenly there was this huge storm. And there was lightning striking all around. Maybe it was in the mountains. And Babaji told the disciple, he said, lay on the floor. And Babaji laid himself on top of the disciple. And lightning struck all around. But the disciple was unharmed. And so he went back on the 6th day to Shankaracharya and said, and so Adi Shankara came to meet Babaji, and so the story goes, became his disciple. So, having said all this, it's also a metaphor, because we may say, well, Babaji hasn't come and the lightning isn't coming and all these things in my own life, it's just a great story. But it means when we seek the protection of the Guru, we are protected. Someone was just asking me the other day, you say, yes, look on the bright side and think positively and, this is how you should remain and be detached from all these things. But when you are in the delusion, you don't remember any of these things. And it's true. It can be very true. And he said, for example, the other day I was really sick and I felt horrible. I actually was, in a lot of pain. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't remember any positive things. So I just looked at the Guru's picture and stared into his eyes. And then I felt peace. And I said, aren't you answering your own question? I mean, are you contradicting yourself? You remembered to ask for help. And that's the thought that I'll close with, is that in the Bhagavad Gita, in the beginning of the 2nd chapter, after Arjuna has finished laying out this whole case as to why he can't fight, as to why it would be wrong to do the right thing, and so on, and he's very confused, Krishna tries to give him, you see, the Gita could have been only 2 chapters. Krishna gives him the whole answer in the beginning of the 2nd chapter. You're grieving for people that, can't be hurt, and you're trying to use wise words, but your ideas are wrong. Don't let this unmanliness befall you, just fight. How is that? And Arjuna says, no. No, I can't. I'm confused. But then he says, you are my guru, you must help me. And then it says in the Gita, Krishna replied as if smiling. And Master explained that phrase, as if smiling, means that the God and the Guru are very pleased that in the depths of our confusion, when we don't know what to do, still we reach out for their help. Say, I don't know, and maybe even what you're going to tell me, I can't do, I'm lost, but I reach for you, for your guidance, for your help. And this as if smiling, not Krishna replied smiling, but as if smiling, means that we may not even see that smile, but we can still feel it in our hearts. We may not see the whole circumstances changing. Oh, that's all you had to do was pray and now I fix it. Well, maybe not always. But we can sometimes feel a lift. We can feel some peace. We can feel I'm not alone in this. And it's actually probably just one of these horror pictures that I'm just waiting for the credits to come so then I can be finished with it. So keep that in mind in whatever challenges you're facing. And remember that the Guru, that God, that Divine Mother can lift you out of all these things. If not externally, then certainly internally. And of course, that's all that really matters.